My name is Alexa, and I'm the program director for Monday Night Marsh. We're very excited to get tonight's show going, and I know I say that all the time about all the shows we do, but I really am super excited, especially because tonight is a special edition of Monday Night MarshStream. It is a solo feature night, and that just basically means we're featuring one performer instead of the usual two to three performers that we do usually each night. And today you're here to see Betsy Murphy perform an excerpt called the O Diary. And that's, as I said, an excerpt from a much longer, actually a very popular book called The Autobiography of an Orgasm that Betsy wrote. And I've worked with Betsy many times throughout the years on Monday Night Marsh. So I'm super thrilled to have her here with us tonight. Sorry about that. Live in an apartment. And let me tell you a little bit more about the O Diary. Every woman should see this show, and every man who loves a woman should see it too. The O Diary, as I said, is based on Betsy's popular book, Autobiography of an Orgasm. Betsy Murphy's one-woman show, The O Diary, is simultaneously funny, heart-wrenching, and inspiring. Betsy's delivery is perfect for this type of story. She doesn't shy away from graphic details of her quest to make friends with her orgasm, but she takes what would, to many people, be some extremely uncomfortable subject matter and tells it to the audience the way a friend might tell you about her new floors while you're getting coffee. That is to say, she makes the listener make people blush and squirm with discomfort. Betsy isn't loud. You have to really lean in and listen to hear what she's saying, but you want to hear it. That's her voice. And though it may be soft, it's damn powerful. That was a review from NUVO magazine. So without further ado, please help me welcome Betsy Murphy.
Okay, gather in everybody. I've got a secret and I do not want it to leave this room because it's a little bit embarrassing. I had my first orgasm when I was 36. Which means I spent more than half my life faking it. I faked it through numerous boyfriends who had no clue. I faked it through 2 marriages. The reason I faked orgasms wasn't because these men weren't good lovers. The reason I faked orgasms was because sometime between being molested by a teenage neighbor when I was 6 and raped as an adult, my body shut down to feeling any pain or pleasure. By the time I was an adult, I had so many secrets, and they were about all the times that I didn't feel safe in my body and I didn't speak up. And then I had this bigger secret that I had never had an orgasm. I never even thought it was possible. I thought I was the only woman in the world to fake orgasms. Until 1989, I was on a date at the movies with my husband, Butch. We were watching When Harry Met Sally. And there's a famous scene in the movie where Harry, played by Billy Crystal, is in a diner with Sally, played by Meg Ryan. And she's challenging him because he said he's had many, many lovers and he's great with everybody. And she said, I'm sure at least one woman has faked an orgasm with you. And he said, it's not possible. And in the middle of this diner, Meg Ryan starts faking an orgasm. She starts moaning and sighing and moaning some more. And Butch and I are holding hands and sharing popcorn, but all of a sudden my hand is getting sweaty and my heart is beating fast. And I am so worried because I'm afraid that my secret is about to be discovered. And at that moment, I wanted to turn to Butch and say, I need to tell you the truth. I love you, but I need to tell you the truth about myself. But everybody in the movie theater is laughing, and I stayed quiet. And we finished the movie, and we went home, and I went to bed first. He came in a little bit later, and he wanted to make love. And so I did what I always did. I made love. But there's this point that I wanted to say to him, please slow down. Because every time I have sex with you, every time we make love, it feels like I'm being assaulted, not by you, but by all the men in the past when I didn't speak up. My heart felt safe with Butch, but my body didn't. But that night, I didn't say anything. And just as he was about to come, so did I. And I did this moan, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's going to figure this out, because I sound exactly like Meg Ryan in When Harry Met Sally. And when we were done, we were both just laying next to each other, and it was silent. And suddenly I hear Betsy, and I was like, oh no, oh no, oh no, he's figured it out. And he just softly says, I love you. And then he rolled over and went to sleep, and my secret was safe. 10 years later, we were divorced. 10 years and 4 kids later, we were divorced. I was almost 40 when I signed the documents. And after I signed the divorce documents, I literally lost my voice for 3 weeks. But really, I had lost my voice so many years earlier. From that first time I didn't speak up when I was 6. I constantly had sore throats that turned into strep throats that turned into scarlet fevers. I was also often depressed, and everybody was always telling me what was wrong with me. Butch would say, take Prozac, you're depressed. Like that was the answer. Doctors gave me diagnoses. They said, get more exercise. I was exercising 10 to 15 hours a week. Take Prozac, exercise, take Prozac, exercise. I took Prozac and it didn't work. And I realized I wasn't depressed. My vagina was depressed from all the times it had been grabbed without my permission. I started reading self-help books because there was no way I was going to ask, friends or family or even doctors about this. So I started reading self-help books to try to figure out what was wrong with me. And I discovered that 1 in 3 women will be sexually assaulted during their lifetime, more than half before the age of 18. And most of those don't speak up. I was the 1 in 3. I also discovered that 1 in 3 women could clinically be diagnosed with female sexual dysfunction. I was the 1 in 3. Perhaps the label of being inorgasmic should be replaced with, we are women who don't feel safe in our bodies. This was at a time in my life where, my kids were getting older, I was getting older, and I started, you hear about people having bucket lists as they start to get older. And so I was like, most people on their bucket list is like, go to Venice with a lover. My bucket list was silently to figure out if I could have an orgasm. I decided to take myself on as a research project. I'd read a book that it says it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at anything. 10,000 hours to become an expert at basketball or playing the harp. I was dedicating 10,000 hours to discovering my orgasm. I set aside an hour a day for research, so hour a day, 7 days a week, 10,000 hours. It would take up to 40 years to find my orgasm, but I was committed. To start the research, I simply Googled videos on how to have an orgasm. I do not recommend that you do that. The videos that came up, it looked like I needed multiple partners, a lot of toys, a lot of batteries, and the women in the videos were much younger than me. I didn't even think it was possible maybe at my age. The next thing I did was start reading books. Instant Orgasm, Easy Orgasm, Becoming Orgasmic, Extended Orgasm, Extended Massive Orgasm, Tantric Orgasm, Super Orgasm, and just to be safe, Orgasm for One. What I discovered was when the body experiences trauma like mine did, it stores the information. And unless we retrain the body with new information and bring the body back into balance, and calm the central nervous system, the body will always think it's in trauma. So for years, even though I was with men that I felt safe with, my body was, still thinking it was in trauma. So if my body was holding trauma, maybe if I healed it, my body still held its potential. Maybe it was possible for me to have an orgasm. I'd been a swimmer, so I knew I could train my body. I decided to quietly take up orgasm as my sport. I had no idea if I'd be any good. So where does one go for courses on orgasm? I was living in Indiana at the time. There was no way I was going to go in a course and say, hi, my name's Betsy. I'm looking for my orgasm. I got on a plane to the place where the women's liberation movement started in the 1960s, New York City. They must know how to have good orgasms there. I signed up for a course on orgasm only to find there's more than one kind. One course said guaranteed you 4 different kinds of orgasm. Another teacher promised 70 types of orgasm. She said, what kind of orgasm did you want? And I was like, I don't know, I just want a good one. While I'm searching for my orgasm in New York at one of these courses, a woman quietly slips me a piece of paper with the guy's name on it. She said, this guy, Bob, is a master stroker. He can help you find your orgasm. So I stuck the piece of paper away, and when I got back to my hotel, I emailed him. Dear Bob, I'd like to find my orgasm. He writes back right away that he only does work on the clitoris, no internal work, and it costs $550 for an hour. That is a lot of money. I write him back and say, when is your next appointment? I knew the session with Bob would focus on my clitoris, so I decided before I meet him, I needed to find mine. I'd given birth to 4 children. I'd had many, many bikini waxes. For over 25 years, I'd had gynecological exams, but I had never taken the time to look at myself. I have no idea what I look like. I didn't even know, there was not even a name for my genitals. In my family, you simply whispered, down there. So remember, I'm in Indiana, but I'm doing my research in New York City. So I book a hotel room for my big reveal. I book a romantic night at this hotel room. It's just me. I check in, I dim the lights, I order room service, I put on the robe, and I didn't know what to do next. So I went in the bathroom and I found they had one of these, mirrors. And so I put it on the, super focus part, and I put it on the ground just right at the edge of the bed. And then I scooted my body just right to the edge of the bed. And I looked down and just looked back up. And it was weird because I didn't even want to look at myself. It was like I was afraid of myself. I was afraid to see the truth of myself. I looked down again, and I see that the outer lips are like this deep shade of burgundy. It reminded me of the velvet curtains in the room. And I reach down and I gently take a finger and I slowly trace from the bottom of my vulva all the way to the top. And I was so surprised because it felt a little bit silky. And I was so surprised because after all the rough sex that I'd had, I thought it would feel like this bumpy country road. Suddenly there's this knock at the door. Oh my God, it's room service. So I quickly, close my robe, go to the door. And it was just this, really beautiful reveal, but I still was like, I didn't even know what to call myself. I've been by this time in my life, the technical term was the vagina vulva complex. I've been called Lady Garden, Cooter, Coot, Coochie. It also been called Camel Toe, Cupcake, Vajayjay, Snatch, Beaver. In the spiritual communities, they call it the yoni. So I commit to getting to know my vagina as my next practice and trying to find my orgasm. I take a course called the Jade Egg Meditation. So the idea is to take an egg, but it's made out of green jade. And so I was told that if you insert this egg into your vagina, it's a way to strengthen your vagina and to heal it. And they've been doing this in China for many, many generations. After experiencing so much abuse, I couldn't feel anything inside my vagina. I was numb. I was willing to do whatever it took. So I start by holding the egg on my belly, and I'm supposed to connect with the egg, like meditate with it. And the whole time I'm thinking, I'm hungry. I don't know how to meditate with an egg. I only know how to fry it or scramble it. And I start thinking of all the ways I love to eat eggs. I love eggs Benedict. I love egg salad sandwiches, deviled eggs. And suddenly I hear Jasmine. I forgot to tell you, I'm in this room with Jasmine, who I call the vagina whisperer. And she's telling me that now I need to place the egg just outside my vulva and let my vagina pull it in. Okay, really? Okay, so I should tell you at this point, I'm not just with Jasmine. I'm in a room full of women in New York City. It's about 30 women. We're undressed from the waist down, but the lights are low. I don't know any of them. And I chosen a place like in the corner so that, you know, I had a little bit more privacy. So nobody is making a sound except for Jasmine, the vagina whisperer, remember? So I hold the egg just outside my vulva and nothing happens. Your yoni will pull it in. So I'm like talking to my yoni and going, okay, yoni, any minute. And I'm meditating and I'm meditating. And suddenly the egg disappears. It's inside of me. And I don't know what to think, except I just want to go like, ta-da, this is like a magic trick. And then Jasmine says, now bear down and release the egg into your hand. So I release it into my hand. And she says, now we should practice letting our yoni pull the egg inside of us and then releasing it. So we practiced this for like 15 minutes, and then I'm getting really good at it. And then she asked us to do another exercise. She says, imagine that there is an elevator inside your vagina, and you're going to insert the egg, and then you're going to imagine bringing the egg from the first floor, which I guess would be like right on the inside, all the way to the second floor, to the third floor, to the penthouse, which I guess is like up close to your cervix. So you pull the egg in, and then using your internal muscles, you take the egg from the first floor to the third floor, down to the second floor, up to the penthouse. And I found that I was getting really good at this. And I also I could start to feel the coolness of the egg in me. And I thought, if I can feel this now, maybe there's hope for, you know, feeling my orgasm someday. So we were sent home with homework to try to wear the egg for 1, 2, 3, 4 hours a day, building up to wearing it all day long. So I got really good at it, and I was feeling very confident. And one day I was in New York City going to meet a friend for lunch, and I decided to wear the egg, you know, to lunch. I was just going to wear it for the whole day. And it was a beautiful spring day in New York City where all the women are out in their spring dresses. And I put on this flowy dress, did my makeup, allowed my yoni to pull the egg inside me. And then I used my muscles to squeeze it up to the penthouse. And I set off on my walk to meet my friend for lunch, which was about 2 miles away. And I'm about 1.5 miles there, and I'd really just forgotten about the egg. You can't even feel it when it's inside of you. And I'm getting ready to cross the street, and all of a sudden, when I start walking, I can feel the egg drop from like the penthouse down to floor 3. So I stopped in the middle of the street, and I used my muscles and willed the egg back up to the penthouse and made sure it was there. And then I started walking again, and I made it across the street, but then I could feel the egg begin to descend down to the second floor. So I stopped when I got across the street, and I used my muscles to pull the egg back up. So I kept walking because I was just a couple blocks to the restaurant. And but my steps started getting, you know, like shorter and shorter and shorter. And finally, it was just like an out of control elevator, and I laid an egg on 5th Avenue. After that, I was hesitant to wear the egg again. I decided to refocus my research on my clitoris. Remember, it was time for my session with Bob, the master stroker. On the morning of my session with Bob in New York City, I woke up really excited because it was like, today was the day that Bob was going to give me my orgasm. And it almost felt like a blind date. I actually bought a new dress. I chose green because that color looks good on me. Normally it's New York City, I would have worn tennis shoes, but I actually put some like leopard print heels on. I wanted to look good for this day. This was a special day. This was my bucket list, getting ready to, you know, I could cross it off. And so I make my way, I was staying on the east side of Central Park, and I walked across Central Park to the west side. And I get to Bob's apartment, and I knock on the door, and he answers it. And there's a guy about my height, and he's wearing a navy blue shirt and like navy blue sweatpants, kind of like what you would imagine an off-duty police officer or fireman would wear on his day off. And I'm first thought is like, he's a little bit underdressed for such a special day. And then Bob introduces me to his friend Anne, who he said was going to assist him. So I guess Anne was going to assist Bob, who was assisting me in finding my orgasm. So Anne is wearing this kind of silky robe, and they asked me to go into the restroom and change into a robe and then join them in the bedroom on the bed. And suddenly this is feeling a little freaky for, a girl from Indiana. And I went into the bathroom to change, and suddenly I felt like I was going to be sick. Like, how had I gotten here? I'm paying $550 for somebody to give me my orgasm. I start to undress and I'm taking off my clothes and I catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror. And I was just disgusted with myself. And I thought, I'm not a sensual being. It's not possible for me. I'm a damaged, woman from Indiana. So I put on the robe and I open the door and I want to tell them, just keep the money. I'm not going to do this. But Bob is waving me over to the bed with his finger. And Anne is undressed. Her robe is on the chair next to the bed, and her legs are butterflied, her knees are butterflied open, and her vulva is staring at me. And it's almost like, come here, Betsy. And even though my head was going, don't do this, you gotta leave, my body walked over to the bed and I sat next to Bob and Anne. And Bob said, look at how her outer lips are swelling. More blood is flowing to the area. Now I'm going to move the hood so you can see her clit. Do you see it? All my life, I'd heard how hard it was to find the clitoris, and it really isn't if you take time to get to know the anatomy. Bob reminded me that the clitoris has 8,000 nerve endings, more than twice as many as the penis. He said women are wired for pleasure. So Bob is wearing these blue latex gloves and he takes a dollop of a gel and he asked Anne, can I touch you now? And she said yes. And so he takes his finger and he starts at the bottom of her vulva and he takes a long stroke all the way up, and Anne just lets out this sigh. And so do I. Bob just starts gently stroking the tip of her clit, just so light. And I'm thinking, how can she possibly feel anything? Because this is so different from like the hard and fast sex that I was used to, and men just grabbing at me and never asking me, did it feel good or not? So Bob's stroking her, but lighter and faster. And she's saying, can you go a little faster? Can you go in circles? Like she's telling him what she wants. And at this point, it's way beyond that scene in when Harry Met Sally. And I'm like, I'm definitely getting my money's worth. This is like the longest orgasm I've ever seen in my life. But by this time, Bob goes, I'm going to take her to a peak now. And I'm like, I'm confused because I'm like, she's been peaking for 10 minutes. And I wasn't too sure what he even meant. Like, what was the peak? What is the orgasm? And all of a sudden, he keeps stroking her, and she lets out this long sigh, and her legs start to shake. And I can feel myself get wet. This is so different from anything I'd ever seen or experienced. And at this moment, Bob says, I'm going to take her down now. And I'm wanting to scream like, no, this is what I'm paying the big money for. Like, this is, this is the good stuff. Why would you stop now? But he takes his hand and he cups it on her genitals and he spends a couple minutes until her breath comes back to normal. And I'm feeling pretty good about everything. I feel like I got my, anatomy down. I'm good. And I'm literally getting up from the bed, getting ready to go change. And he goes, oh no, now it's your turn. And this was another moment that I thought, I cannot do this. I cannot do this. But I did. I got in bed. I kept my robe on and I just opened the bottom part of it. I kept my knees together. And Bob said, Betsy, when you are ready, butterfly your knees open. And I butterflied my knees open. Betsy, open your eyes. Betsy, look at me, make eye contact. Betsy, do I have permission to touch you now? Betsy, use your voice. Use your voice, speak up. Yes, yes, you can touch me now. Betsy, how do you want to be touched? I don't know how I want to be touched. Nobody has ever asked me before. I don't know what I'd like. I'd spend years shielding myself from boys and then men, wanting to claim it, wanting to grab my pussy without my permission. How do I want to be touched? I don't know. Nobody has ever asked. Just don't hurt me or force me or surprise me. But I don't say any of this. I say, can you just do what you did to Anne to me? And Bob takes his finger and starts at the bottom of my vulva and takes this long stroke up until he reaches my clitoris. And my vagina quivers like the wings of 1,000 hummingbirds are flapping inside. And Bob says, wow, you are very orgasmic. What? And this is actually pissing me off. This is making me angry because all my life I had been told I was the problem. I'd been told my body was damaged. I am the problem. I went to doctors and they all told me what was wrong with me. Nobody ever asked if I'd been abused. I guess nobody wants to talk about those things, do they? It makes us all uncomfortable. Bob continues to do these slow strokes, and it's feeling good, and it's also feeling not so good. With the pleasure was some pain. And I remember all those years that I closed my eyes and didn't speak up to block out the boys and then men who harassed and assaulted me. But it was never rape, so I didn't feel like I could speak up, because rape to me is when somebody holds a knife at your throat, threatens you. And then one night when I was 40, I was asleep in a room, and in the middle of the night, a man I only knew just a little bit, I woke up and his knees were on my shoulder and he was trying to force himself into my mouth. He was choking me. We were spending the weekend at a birthday party in a house with mutual friends, and I'd gone to bed much earlier than everybody else. And several hours later, this man wakes me up. And I don't know, I was like, he was drunk, he was very aggressive, but I didn't say no. I didn't even speak. My voice froze. It was like my voice had been stolen. And suddenly I'm hearing Bob again, and he's saying, Betsy, do you want to go longer? And I realize I'm back in the room with Bob and Anne, and I'm safe. I'm safe. And I look at Bob in his navy shirt, and I look at Anne, who I've known less than 45 minutes. And I said, no, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. Thank you. And I knew they wanted to help me, but I got up, put my clothes back on. I walked back to my hotel, and I made the decision that if it was possible to have an orgasm, that I wanted to be the one to claim it for myself. I didn't want Bob and Anne or a jade hag or a therapist or a doctor or a pill or a toy to give it to me. If it was possible, I wanted to do it myself. I wanted to claim it myself. But I realized I needed to claim my voice first. And it did not take 10,000 hours. And I did have an orgasm. I actually had more than one, like many. I actually made up for lost time, still am. And I realized I was never an orgasmic. I just lived in a body that didn't feel safe expressing itself. Orgasm is simply the body's natural way to express itself. And I want to thank you because it felt safe tonight being able to say this to you, being able to share my secrets. So thank you. So I'm going to share one more thing that's on my bucket list, or was on my bucket list. So this is like 10 years after my orgasm research, 10 years after my success, healing my body, finding my voice. And I had something else on my bucket list. And so I'm 57 now. So I was 55 at the time. It was 2 years ago. And on this dark, stormy night, I found myself staring at another woman's genitals. And this was new for me. I was so nervous and I was unsure what to do next. But I made sure the lights in the room were low. There was soft music playing. When I didn't know what to do, I just would breathe with her. But I noticed her vulva was this, like deep burgundy. It looked like a rose that was just getting ready to open. It was so beautiful. And I wondered about these hidden parts of ourselves as women that so many of us never have seen. And it made me so grateful for this moment, even though it took me 55 years to get here. I didn't know what to do, so I leaned in for a closer look, and I just waited for her to give me some sort of signal. And suddenly I could see the lips of her vulva spread, and I could see her vagina beginning to open. And my grandchild was born that night at home in a circle of women. I'm a grandmother, Gogo, and it was a little girl, and her name is Raina. And before her mother Harley even picked her up, Raina used her voice. She intuitively knew to use her voice. She let out the sweetest cry, and all of us listened. We listened. We let her cry take up space in her body and in the room and in the world. So Raina always knew, or so Raina always knows that it's safe to express herself. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for that. I just need to take a second. Like after hearing that every time, I'm just like, oh, I feel like I can exhale. I feel like obviously, a lot of women can relate to this. I'm so curious. I want to open it up immediately to anybody in the audience that has any questions or any comments about this piece. You can use the chat feature. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for everyone for being here on a Monday night. Thanks, Victoria.
Oh. These are amazing to read.
Thank you. Oh, sorry you missed it, Switch.
This is being recorded though, so you can find it on YouTube after.
So originally I never intended to have the show recorded because I really felt like it needed to be in a theater with an audience just to have the experience. And I thank you for inviting me tonight. When you first contacted me, I thought, oh, I can do my new show. I have a book and a new show called Chasing Temples. It's coming out in August, but I felt it was more important to do this show, and I'll wait and do that show when I'm really ready. I did an excerpt of it in 2 excerpts in January at Monday Night Marsh. And once again, one benefit during this time of the pandemic is how spaces have been opened up virtually. And I really appreciate the Marsh for giving me a platform, both in the theater and now virtually, for us to gather, because there are people here that would never have come to, you don't live in San Francisco. So please, let's support each other. Oh my gosh, Maureen, a lot of my old swim friends. Oh my gosh. Linda, hi, thank you. Melanie, thank you. Oh, Michael, oh, y'all are, thank you so much for being here. So hopefully when Chasing Temples comes out, I'll be able to do that at the Marsh as well. But for anybody who's a storyteller, I'm, look at the Monday Night Marsh. Sometimes it's just 15 minutes of storytelling. And once again, especially for women, up until this point, so much of the arts have been created by men, and there are some incredible artists. I'm so grateful for people on this call, including Michael Shute, who has an incredible show called A Lesson in Swimming. But we also need women's voices in the world. And sometimes if you could just get up for 15 minutes and share your story, or do a 5-minute story with the moth. For me, somebody that used to have sore throats all the time, ever since my book came out, in 2014, I've never been sick since then. I've never had a sore throat since. So we talk about, how trauma is stored in our body. And I now have this super immune system. It's pretty amazing.
Can I jump in here with a question, Alexa?
I'm sorry?
Can I jump in with a question here?
Oh, absolutely, David, yes.
I got a privileged position with my finger on the button here. So, Betsy, I was really moved by the way you end the piece with this excerpt anyway, with the next generation, with your daughter and your grandchild. Mm-hmm. And so I found myself wondering both what effect, if any, has this had on your relationship with your kids? What do you have to say to the next generation, if that's not too much to ask of you after you've shared so much?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. Well, it's interesting. When I was writing the book, Autobiography of an Orgasm, I actually thought it was a book without that title. I was writing a book about my life between the US and Zimbabwe. And I thought that was a fascinating story about a divorced woman that, goes to Africa to find herself, when really there are so many stories like that. And this is what's so good about workshopping your stories, because I had one person, during something like this say to me, well, there's one line in that about your sensual life. Could you write about that? And I was like, there's no way I could tell the truth about that, because I had not even told anybody in my own family these secrets. And at the time I was 45 years old. And so when I did start writing the truth about my sensual life, and how uncomfortable it made me, I was like, okay, this is the story I have to write. And even if I don't share it. And when the book came out, my kids were 20 years, in their 20s. So I have 2 boys who are comedians, a daughter who's an educator, and a son who's works as in marijuana in the consulting industry. So, imagine telling your kids, oh, my book is actually not about my life between the US and Africa. And, here's what the book is about. And I need to tell you why it's important. And other than the 2 comedians knowing that there was, potential material for them to use on stage, they also understood the serious nature of at their young ages of 20, they had already been, experienced friends that had experienced assault, abuse, and didn't speak about it. So they did understand why it was important for me to speak up, even if maybe they wished it wasn't their mother. And so with this next generation, I now have 2 grandchildren that are both girls, age 2 and 3. And it's not that my parents did anything wrong. It's just that we didn't talk about these things. And I was, 45 when I had to tell my mom, this book is coming out, or it was 50 at the time, but the book is coming out. And, she was not happy about it at first. But since then, she didn't read the book until 2 years later, and her book club selected the book, and these women are in their 70s and 80s. And they each went around the circle and said, well, actually something like that happened to me and I never told anybody. So there's been so much healing going on with this. And, the book was released in 2014, 2017, Me Too movement started happening. And once again, we need to be angry. And at the same time, for me, what I needed to do was take responsible for myself. I couldn't keep blaming everybody. And I looked at myself in a gentle way of, is it possible for me to heal my body? And if so, that's nobody else's responsibility. So if we can start teaching both our boys and girls, body autonomy, not just around intimacy, but around respect for another body. We're seeing protests, this impacts every area of our life, like respect for the body. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It can be hard to figure out how to have these conversations, because I think everybody's different too. So it's like, how can we reach as many people as possible? How are there different ways of explaining this or talking about it? It's another challenging thing to have to take into consideration sometimes. I'm curious, how did your mom react when she found out? So did she find out pretty much everything that had happened to you by reading the book, or did you kind of tell her ahead of time, hey, this is what you should be expecting?
I told her ahead of time, and she, I can't change the lighting right now, but she just didn't, she at the time did not want to know. And I respected her for that, because she grew up in a family that didn't talk about these things, but I just was unwilling to, I got more uncomfortable holding the stories in versus what I knew was going to be uncomfortable conversations with my family. And so we just have to have the courage to show up for these uncomfortable conversations. And maybe the first time people aren't going to receive them well, but you will be surprised. You will be surprised, because we've had really beautiful conversations in my family since then, and with friends. But I think it's important, you need to do the work to heal your own anger and trauma before you share it with somebody else, because then that's just triggering everybody. So when I just thought, well, I'm just going to take responsibility for my body and see what's possible. And once again, so many of us have experienced, the odds are 1 in 3 have experienced some sort of trauma, and the men aren't even talking about, their trauma. And but we need to, be responsible for ourselves, our own healing, and then using our voice to, do something like this, sharing space with each other so other people can listen and look for ways to heal too.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit more about the second book that you've written? Is that a sequel, or is that something totally different?
The next book, I've actually had, I've written a book since Autobiography of an Orgasm. It was called Beyond O, and it was actually what happened as a consequence of speaking up. It's when you speak up, it's not everybody's going to go, oh, great, we're so happy that you spoke up. It was some severe, like I said, within my family. And I write about that in the book. And then also being a woman, like finally figuring out my body, falling in love with my body, everything working, and, turning 50. And all of a sudden I'm living in this world that is dismissing